Hi folks, I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the Father Joe Podcast. I'm Ken Calvert alongside my very dear friend, Father Joe Grimaldi, brought to us by Hoot McInerney's Star Lincoln. Well, the 2019 Detroit Auto Show is over, and that means that the tents are up and the prices are down? No. It's time to check out the incredible after-the-show pricing at Hoot McInerney's Star Lincoln. Father Joe is driving the new 2019 Lincoln MKC, and guess what? So am I. I helped him pick it out. We went to starlincoln.com. You can virtually see what your new Lincoln will look like and calculate your price. That's the great news. Look, with these Michigan winters, it's either freezing, or it's warm, or it's snowing, or it's freezing rain. We never know what we're going to get. It's easy to shop at home at starlincoln.com. Tell them you heard about Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln on the Father Joe Podcast, located at 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield, and visit starlincoln.com. Well, coming up February 14th, think I better remember to run out, maybe get some flowers. Gosh,
chocolate. You better get some chocolate.
Sure, you got to get some chocolate.
Get dark chocolate because
chocolate.
That's pretty healthy.
Well, that's what they tell me.
Yes.
That's what they tell me. But
I only eat it because it's healthy.
Listen, if we're going to do St. Valentine's Day correctly, we're going to get the good stuff. Okay?
Wasn't there a massacre in Chicago on that day?
I had a feeling you might bring that up. Yes, there was, and they weren't playing nice that day.
No, they were not. No chocolates involved.
No, not at all. It says here, St. Valentine, officially known as St. Valentine of Rome, is a 3rd century Roman saint widely celebrated on February 14th and commonly associated with courtly love. However, I want to read you this part. In 1969, the Roman Catholic Church removed St. Valentine from the general Roman calendar because so little is known about him. However, the Church still recognizes him as a saint, listing him in the February 14th spot of Roman, now you have to help me say the word,
Martyrology.
The legends attributed to the mysterious saint are as inconsistent as the actual identification of the man. That starts the first part of my paradox. So I'm confused why they did that, first of all.
Well, because, it's like himself, and Christopher is another one. I mean, they removed him from the Roman calendar, but by the same token, there are a lot of people that still have a St. Christopher's medal in their car. They're not going to go anywhere without it, okay?
Right, yeah.
Now, whether or not he's a saint, I look at it this way. There are so many saints that we don't have names of. They could easily have been saints. Now, St. Valentine, it's kind of interesting that because he is a martyr, he was killed, if you want, for the faith.
I believe he was beheaded.
For the faith. So you have the color red is prominent whenever we celebrate the feast of a martyr in the church. So now red at that time was symbolic of blood. And of course, red is the color that was picked up for the hearts, which again, blood, red, hearts, all of these things. So when we celebrate the feast of St. Valentine, notice even the candy boxes are all red.
Right.
The roses you get are red. So red becomes the prominent color. It's interesting to me that very often people don't know where the idea comes from. Why is it red and not green or blue, whatever the case might be?
And I'm going to tell you right now that I was one of those people. I did not know that the Genesis, being a martyr, suggested blood is red, and now...
And those are the color of the vestments that we use at Mass.
Well, I do like the fact, though, that he was considered associated with courtly love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love.
What do you define courtly love as? Now we'll see.
Oh, I think that is the process of starting with the first kiss and then actually having a girlfriend and eventually getting engaged and then finally being married.
Okay, and I had a different view of it.
Okay.
I was thinking of courtly love, when you have royalty and you have the courts,
Yes.
and there's often courtly love that goes on there that's not so civilized, as you explained so beautifully, which I think should be the right way to love, okay?
So you took it in a whole different direction.
Well, in courtly love, what happens in the courts of
Oh.
the royalty. You should be on the congregation of saints.
Well, I can think about it. I'm busy as heck, as you know. I've got this podcast. I have to not only help co-host, but I edit, and of course I try and get involved with social media. Now, social media will blow up. Will blow up on Valentine's Day, naturally.
Will it really?
Oh, of course it will, Joe. I've got to teach you this thing called Facebook and Twitter, and there's all sorts of them out there. Anyway, I digress. I was asking you, and I'm going to look now. I'm wondering if there are any Christian-based Valentine's Day cards in a card shop, a Hallmark shop. What do you think?
I don't know, but I suspect that there are people that have so committed to Jesus Christ that if they do send a Valentine Day card, they say Valentine's Day card, very often they would associate it with the love of Jesus, a chaste love, if you want, rather than an erotic love, okay? So it's basically the idea of a chaste love that is greetings that people might give with a Christian background. I don't know if Hallmark has caught on to that. They may have. There may be cards that I don't know about. But certainly individuals might do that when they send a card to someone that they respect, not necessarily someone that they're dating, So the whole idea of a chaste love that might be.
I guarantee you it'll be a very small section if there's one at all.
Well, it's kind of interesting that today I received a card, and it was one of these cards that came from a friend of mine who was a nun. And it was a little bit of everything. St. Patrick's Day, St. Joseph's Day, St. Valentine's Day.
No kidding.
And it was an image.
Of all three?
Of
saints?
It was a chocolate bar. But in the form of an image.
That's nice.
But it was celebrating all of those things.
That's really nice.
So it is. And it doesn't necessarily refer to an erotic love. It refers to just, I wish you love on that day.
Now, on the altar, on Sunday or even on February 14th, the actual event, the day, the celebration of St. Valentine's Day, we used to say, hey, now listen, don't forget, if you haven't done it already, guys, get out there, at least get the card, get the candy, get something. Don't go home empty-handed. Do you ever do anything like that, or is that not the place to do something like that?
I don't know. At first it doesn't seem appropriate, but I don't think there's any harm in doing it, let's say, at the end of Mass, as a joke, as not a... Well, I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just to get a little bit of a rise out of the people before they leave the church.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but probably not during the Mass or during the homily or anything like that. It would not be appropriate. But during the, at the end, maybe. Feast of St. Valentine's, you have to look at it this way. The readings don't always reflect the particular saint. So, for example, this time of year, we're reading, the first reading is the letter of Paul to the Hebrews. And so it really gives us an idea of comparing how Jesus reflects God on this earth. And yet, if you look at the Old Testament, you have the Old Testament, God was the God that appears in a storm and a fire and all of these different things. So a comparison. Now we have God showing himself as Jesus, and so that we have this person who's very accessible, very personable. Whereas in the Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament, you see this God and fire and the storm. And anyway, so what I'm saying is that we could be celebrating the feast of a saint today, which we weren't, but by the same token, the readings don't reflect any particular saint.
It doesn't make the day any less important in the church.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
Part two of my paradox. And there will be more parts to that paradox, too.
We have 3 or 4, I'm sure.
Well, so there are other St. Valentines.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a couple of seconds to go there? I mean, are you familiar with them?
Of course we have.
Right. So who were or who are the other?
Okay. I don't know, and I don't think many others would know. I know that there is such a person as Saint Valentina, which is the feminine form of Valentine.
Right.
But, we have to look at it this way. Historically, we're talking the first couple of centuries, and we're talking about martyrs. Do we have proof? Is there anything that shows us, because of evidence, that these people truly existed, or have they become popular in the minds of the people, and therefore this popularity continued because of the interest that people might have in the idea of love, as you were mentioning, and so on and so forth. And then you attach it to a person, St. Valentine's, and now you have something else to back this idea of love. You have St. Valentine's. Let's make it a Valentine's Day. And we have a romantic setting at a restaurant. We have chocolates, as you mentioned, and flowers and all of these other things. And, I mean, we really don't have evidence. This is what I'm getting at. We have tradition. Tradition is not always evidence, okay? So because they lived so long ago, we're talking the first couple of centuries, we're not really sure who they are. So we do the best we can.
I found it interesting, okay, that last line that I was talking about with the Catholic Church, deciding not to make it an actual celebration of the feast.
Right.
However, on February 14th, there is a celebration and a feast, and it's for the brothers Cyril and Methodius. And curious, and the reason why it's even more curious to me and to some of those people that are listening to this podcast right now, is that you were assisting for, I would say 6 months, maybe
Correct.
8 months or so?
6 months.
At Cyril and Methodius, I believe out in Sterling Heights.
Correct.
A very active church.
Very active. Devotional.
And you, emotionally, did you say?
Devotional.
And devotional.
Yeah.
Well, the way you described it, often emotional as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I agree.
Steeped in tradition, correct?
Yes.
All right. So that'll be a very big day for them next week.
I would hope so. I think, that is something that I wish other churches would do on a regular basis. For example, what I'm getting at is celebrating the name that we associate with the church. So on the Feast of St. Patrick, well, that has its own paraphernalia that surrounds it with the Irish music and all of this other stuff. Let's pick something else. Well, you might have the Church of St. Cyril and Methodius that we just spoke about, where several churches are named after them. Why not have a special day? It could be a day of picnics, a day of bringing parishioners together and doing something special on it. Obviously, the weather doesn't lend itself here in Michigan for picnics, but maybe you could have some indoor activities that would bring all of the parishioners together, celebrating their patron saints. Because Cyril and Methodius then becomes the patron saints of the people that attend that church.
And a lot of people probably say, well, wait a minute, why 2 saints? Well, they were brothers.
They were brothers. They did similar work, missionary work, and preached the gospel well. If I'm not mistaken, they might be doctors of the church as well, so that they have something to offer the church by their own preaching, their own studies, their own theology. Usually they are associated with the Eastern way of doing things, the Eastern rites. The Eastern Catholic Church, I think, would know a lot more about Cyril and Methodius than the Roman Catholic would.
Well, I believe that it has to. I have a couple of relationships that their background is Ukraine, and I know that both Cyril and Methodius, I believe, did a lot of their work in what is known today as the Ukraine.
Sure.
So there must be some Ukrainian parishioners, I would think, out on the east side that would attend that church. And
Of course.
Did you notice that when you were saying Mass?
We did. The Slovaks and the Ukrainians were the preponderance of the population. We had a lot of Polish attend as well. So because of all of these different ethnic groups being somewhat culturally related, we would have them attend that particular church. And many of the festivities that took place, for example, where food was involved, food is always a very important part of culture. You know that as well as I. And so they would bring all of their ethnic delicacies and so on and so forth to share among the people. So it was celebrated in that way. I think to celebrate the feast of St. Cyril and Methodius, the people of that parish, they might be doing that today. I don't know, to be honest. I'm not there anymore. But to say that they bring different foods and desserts and whatever else that they would like to share.
You brought up something in the body of that discussion, and you were saying very devotional, and you brought up the idea of having an event or a day-long celebration, whatever it might be. That would be a perfect opportunity for people to bring out some incredible food.
Correct.
I certainly enjoy the food that they provide. I remember as a kid, and I want to say, and I know you're going to correct me on this.
Oh, maybe not. Come on.
I remember at St. Bede, I must have been in about the 4th or 5th grade, maybe the 6th, it doesn't matter. Father Keating, who was the pastor, and I want to say it was Palm Sunday. I could be wrong, so correct me on this.
No.
They rented a mule, and Father Keating rode the mule from this little area up to the front of the church.
And they waved palms at him.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Just like Jesus coming into Jerusalem.
So would that have been on Palm Sunday?
Yes, it would have been.
Oh, okay. Now, you can't blame me because I was a kid. But I remember that was so much fun. We looked forward to that for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we all wanted to pet the mule, of course.
Sure.
But I thought that was, an interesting thing.
When I mentioned devotional, one of the things I was aiming at was that more than the other Catholic churches in the area, a church like St. Cyril and Methodius would celebrate the liturgy in a different way, almost tending to have a sense or a feeling of the Eastern Rite. In other words, the preponderance of altar service. On a given Sunday, you might have anywhere between 50 and 60 altar servers accompanying the priest into the church. You would have the preponderance of
incense. Was
a lot of incense.
A lot of incense was
used throughout the Mass.
Telling me that. Yeah,
you'd have the way people wore their garbs. Which would be a lot more ornate than usual. I don't know what you call that, gold lame, that kind of stuff,
Sure.
And all of these colors, would come across with the priestly garbs that people would wear. The different prayers that was said, the way the women wore the veils over their heads, the way people received communion is different from other places because you have an altar rail. People come to the altar rail, and the communion is given to them by intinction. And it's a privilege that they have to do that because usually we don't do it by intinction. The intinction is getting the host dipped into the wine and then given. Also, primarily, the communion is given only by an ordained minister, whether it's a deacon or a priest, but an ordained minister.
They're not kneeling with a paten, with an altar.
Oh, yes.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
With a server, no kidding.
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, each of the servers would have patens, and they go along with the priest, and so on and so forth. So this is what I mean by devotional. They are very devotional. They have a certain number of prayers that are said before and after Mass, and during Mass too, that are different from what's offered in the other Roman Catholic churches in the area.
By the way, I know a lot of people will divide the podcast while they're listening, start and come back. We may be confused. No, we were talking about Valentine's Day at the very beginning, and we did sort of transcend into Cyril and Methodius because of the fact that on February 14th, that's the actual feast day. But it turned out to be a really interesting discussion about all of this. We got into a lot of cool areas. As a matter of fact, you've given me a number of ideas. I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Because I got some interest on this from people, and I'm finding out a lot of people do have family relics And so I just wanted to ask you very quickly. They say that most churches have at least one relic of the saint, the bearer of the church's name. Are there relics of St. Hugo, relics of St. Regis, relics of Cyril and Methodius, St. Owen?
I would have to really check that out. Usually the relics were placed underneath the main altar so that it became part of the altar itself. I'm not going to be able to say that's for sure in every one of them, but yes, in the old days, traditionally, the relic of the saint was within the main altar of that church, and it was underneath, so that it was always there. Now, what they do today, I'm not an expert at this, so I can't really speak to that point, but yes, most churches, I want to say, I agree with you, most churches do have relics of the patron saint right underneath or within the altar.
Well, that's interesting, and I've been waiting to ask you that.
See,
it was one of those questions last week. I went, darn it, why didn't I ask him that?
Well, every time we have a new church, and it's blessed by the bishop, the oils that we use, the oil of chrism is used to be smeared, if you want, on the walls and on the altar itself. And so that's part of the blessing of the church. But it's also the time when the bishop or the archbishop, whomever he may be, places the relics underneath the altar so that's always there too.
But you have access to them, don't you? Or not? Are they sealed?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Depending on how they were placed there.
Boy, now we managed to get into 4 topics in one. I guess that's the best way for me to say Happy Valentine's Day, Father Joe Grimaldi.
Well, happy Feast of St. Cyril and Methodius.
I see what you did there. I see what you did
we
there.
Have to bring them together.
You're a good one, my good one. I'll tell you what. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for dialing by and enjoying another edition of the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. I'm Ken Calvert along with Father Joe, and thanks to our proud supporters, Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road and Telegraph in Southfield. See you next time.
Special service at McInerney's, and look forward to seeing you. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.